Hi, this is Sherry of The Delicious Story, and in this episode we'll be talking about the very challenging subject of constructive criticism. But before that, I'd like to invite you to check out Story Gift Shop, where we have home decor, clothing, and much more. Items meant to inspire you to live your life story well. I'd also like to take this moment to ask you to subscribe and hit the bell, because we'll be putting up more episodes of vodcasts of The Delicious Story here on the Story Gifts channel. Now, I'm going to introduce today's guest. We've got Tracy Kelly, who is a writer and a yoga instructor. She writes for her corporate clients, but she's been a yoga instructor for 13 years. We have Jennifer Phipps, who's been a massage therapist for 13 years, and she helps clients with chronic pain. We have Celeste Rose, who is a certified body and integrated sexuality coach. Felicia, who owns Cirque Wonderland Studios and Cirque Wonderland Entertainment, and Claire Williams-Vavra, who's a sales engagement management for Quick Hire. So get ready to meet the guests. We're going to dig into constructive criticism, both how to give it and how to get it when it comes your way.
You know, I'm really so grateful to have all of you lovely ladies on today to talk about constructive criticism. And so I wanted to take this opportunity, because we do have people from such different backgrounds, to talk about your expertise specifically in your world and how constructive criticism plays out for you. And I think I'll have to switch to gallery view just so I can call you out. So, and then I'll switch back and forth. So Jennifer, since you started the first person I talked to today, let's start with you and ask you just to kind of tell us about your vocation, your business, and where constructive criticism has played out in your life.
Well, good morning. I'm Jennifer Phipps. I am a licensed massage therapist in Des Moines and have been here for 13 years. Wow. Constructive criticism plays a huge role in my business and what I do. I think when you're doing body work with somebody, having an open line of communication and finding out how somebody feels when they're done is key to my growth and to the growth of my clients. So I have, over the years, kind of started initiating a constructive criticism with each client. Sometimes when they first come in, I'll ask them about previous massages, what they've liked or disliked, so that I'm aware of, okay, they don't like this. And then at the end, I ask for full-on criticism. What would you change about this massage? What did you like about this? What area do you feel you got more movement in, or didn't feel so much movement? And I feel when I initiate constructive criticism with people, they tend to be more open and honest rather than using a feeling sentence like, I didn't like that, I hated this. You know, they're more apt to give me details, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, that certainly makes sense. And also you're asking them for constructive criticism, which is kind of a nice position to be in, right?
It is. I've found through the years that it's easier receiving constructive criticism if I'm asking for it.
Yeah.
Because then they kind of have to think about the question that I'm posing to them, rather than, again, stating, you know, a feeling like I don't like that therapist, or I didn't like that she, well, why? You know, give me details.
Yeah. How long have you been in providing massage therapy?
13 years.
13 years. Okay. Wow. So you've probably really honed how to ask for that feedback too.
Yes, it's taken 13 years.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. Okay. Well, I'm going to move on to Tracy. Tracy, if you just kind of share your background and what it is how constructive criticism plays out for you.
Hi there. I'm Tracy Kelly. My background kind of straddles two elements. I am a former corporate manager and still work in a corporate environment on a contract basis as a writer. And also I have creative writing experience, as well as being a yoga instructor for the past 13 years. And so I actually have kind of a different language that I use when speaking about constructive feedback, which is more constructive critique. What I find, especially in both areas of those worlds that I've run in a creative element, whenever you're talking with someone about what they're creating, well, everyone can have an opinion. It's how that opinion is delivered and for what purpose. And often in the creative community, and I know a lot of other people probably relate to this, the ultimate goal is to make sure that the work or the product is what that creator wants it to be. So it's not just a matter of my opinion that I'm giving forth. It's a matter of what's going to make that product true to the vision of the creator. And the same thing kind of applies in yoga as well. Far be it from me to tell someone what they're supposed to do with their body. It has to be a very fluid conversation between the two of us. Now, I may bring constructive knowledge of yoga style or discipline to that individual, but at the end of the day, if I don't listen to them, then we're not going to be able to get the full impact of that practice for that individual. Now, do these things parlay into corporate world? Sometimes. And I know many people in the corporate culture have strived to create a better balance between just criticizing someone with their work or their personality versus helping them grow within that environment. So that's kind of the bizarre positioning that I take on all of those elements when it comes to constructive critique.
Yeah, and I got a headache already thinking about this, sort of balancing these things. But I especially think about that point about criticism. The word itself is I take it negatively right away. I'm trying to make this all about me today, but right away, that's a negative word. And constructive sounds like building, but I can see, no. Just a second. I can see how, you've really finessed the difference, the variance of this. And I kind of like getting even out of the word criticism entirely, maybe. I like critique. Critique sounds a little bit more positive. Thanks so much for that, Kelley. Well, we'll come back to this because I think, like I said, I think you've just given me something to really think about that. So Celeste, I'm so excited to talk to you because I know you had come with a very special coaching position, and it's got to make for interesting talk about what's constructive.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Similar to Tracy, I have a corporate background. I am a registered corporate coach and left corporate America in 2018 and started my own business. I'm a certified body confidence coach and just completing my certification through the Tantric Institute of Integrated Sexuality. And what I've learned is with regard to criticism, so much with regard to personal relationships. And I see it from both sides, the corporate aspect in running a business, as well as relating with the people in our lives, specifically our romantic partners or people that we're really close to. And what I've really learned is that there was a part of me for a very long time that wanted to point out spelling errors or how this person showed up in a meeting or how they said what they said and how it came across. And it was really coming from a place of like really seeing people at their highest and wanting them to succeed. But what I also recognized is that when I was providing this feedback that I thought was powerful and I thought would really help people grow, it wasn't always received in the way that I was hoping it was received. I came across as critical. I came across as demanding. And so doing this work around relationships, I've really learned that unless somebody is coming to me to ask me my feedback or ask me my opinion on a situation, I have found it best to keep my feedback to myself. The reason, and this is especially true in my romantic relationship with my partner, because when I say, hey, the way that you talked to your mother at dinner tonight, it felt very this way, or it felt that way. It's almost like the defenses go up, right? From the person receiving the feedback. And so what I've learned is that when I focus on how that situation made me feel and I want to then change another person or get them to act or behave differently so that I can feel more comfortable, that's about me, not about them. And so I've really learned to assess my own feelings and my own emotions with regard to a situation and address that internally rather than providing that to them. And then I notice when that happens, he'll say, so I noticed I felt this way. And what do you think about that? And then I get to share from a place of him wanting to hear or him seeking what I have to say. And it's received so much differently and it feels much more empowering.
I'm already feeling calmer. Thank you for that, Celeste. Yeah, and I'll come back to these. I'm taking vigorous notes because I want to open this up in just a few minutes. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so back to gallery. Let's see. Okay, Felicia, hello. So you've got a very unique space too. Everybody's here is unique. It's just amazing. Anyway, so talk about where constructive criticism. You mentioned before we met that you straddle a couple of different ways that you bring that to the table too.
Yeah, I'm Felicia Coe, and I own Cirque Wonderland Studios and Cirque Wonderland Entertainment, and we do circus arts, aerial arts, acrobatics, all kinds of things. And on the entertainment side, we're doing more. I'm working with clients, people who are hiring us, as well as the contractors that I hire to do the performances, which requires criticism in a number of different ways, both to me and back to my contractors. But more day to day in the studio at Cirque Wonderland Studios, I teach and lead classes. I also have a staff of front desk and administrative and other coaches. The way that I see criticism come up most frequently for me is with my students, and they're there to get the criticism to an extent. So making sure that feedback is given in a way that they can receive, and kind of a lot of what Tracy was saying was really sticking out to me with her yoga practice. I also want to say, Tracy, you have like a perfect radio voice.
Yes, she does.
I was like, oh my gosh, that's a podcast voice right there.
It's like chocolate, melted chocolate.
Yeah,
it's very good. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah. But very similarly, I need to know what my students' goals are before I can give the feedback. One blanket universal area is going to be safety. So if anything's being done in a way, just because of what we do and the inherent danger with it, if anything's being done that's going to cause the client immediate or long-term injury, then that's something that I can pretty easily give feedback on for everyone. But outside of that, we have all kinds of different students from all walks of life, and they have different goals. Some of them are just coming in to have fun. They don't care if their foot is pointed. They don't want to hear it from me. They want to get in there and have fun. And others are there to really advance in a skill and maybe take this to a semi-professional or professional level. And so they do want more in-depth and pinpointed critique from me. So fostering that environment, not only so I know what they are looking for and what their goals are, but also so they feel that there's a trust there. So when I give that feedback, they can really accept it and hear it, and it doesn't feel like an attack or being picked on. So those are the big areas, and I get to do that pretty much every day over the last, I've been doing this for 12 years, and it's really just a skill that only gets better with practicing.
Wow. Oh, thank you for sharing that. And I'm just amazed by the level of experience that you all have in your professions and your business. It's really impressive. Anyway, Claire, thank you so much for being the best for the last, right? To talk about what you do and how constructive criticism plays out in your world.
Sure. It's great to meet everybody. And thanks, Sherry, for hosting this podcast. So my name is Claire Williams-Vavra, and I come from executive hospitality management. I had a team of about 50 in hospitality, which has its ups and downs. If anybody here has ever served, you know that you have the fun part, which is talking with tables and getting to meet people, and the lame part, which is dishes and cleanup. So I had a big team for years there. And then I actually transitioned to a complete career shift to get back my weekends into SaaS and technology. So I've been in technology now for about 2 years. And right now I'm a sales enablement manager for a startup company called Quick Hire, and I love every second of it. So how does constructive criticism impact me, and how have I been using it over the last decade? most importantly, as we've all touched on to some degree, with the relationships in our life. And for me, when I have a team, it's critical to set the basis of what I call feedback, but they're interchangeable, feedback from the get-go. And much like Celeste said, it's got to start with the human connection. It's got to start with the relationship and trust. And if you don't have those things, then it's basically like walking down the street and giving feedback to some random stranger. And of course, walls are going to come up. Mine would. So, when I talk about feedback and I talk about constructive criticism on teams that I manage, it's a reciprocal two-way street. So I make sure that there's enough trust built from the get-go and that human connection that they know that they can also come to me and share feedback. It's not a one-way street, top down. So those are different ways. I've got different tips and tricks I've learned over the years to make it successful. I could go into those real quick. We talk about actions and behaviors. What are the actions and behaviors needed to address? And specifics, being objective, kind of taking the glasses off, as somebody's already kind of mentioned, checking yourself. And then making sure to follow up. I think that's something that we don't really talk about a lot when it comes to feedback or constructive criticism. It's one thing to say it, one thing to have a conversation about it, but are we actively following up to ensure that what was discussed is happening? Yeah.
Okay, great. Oh, wow. Well, I really love that because actually that's all of this really ties into some of the questions that I kind of want to dive into. But Claire, I love that, you're bringing this from is it fair to say corporate almost, structure, and that's where a lot of people live, and it is, having been a person employed in a corporate structure, I know how hard it can be sometimes to sit and listen to, that kind of feedback that you have to be willing to receive and to do something about if you're going to be employed. So that's really important too. Okay, well, I had some questions, and I'm even open to, wherever this organically goes. I'm in gallery view now, so you can just kind of give me a nod if you kind of want to jump in there. Right off, let me ask what might seem like the dumb question, but we talked about opinion versus feedback, or opinion versus versus a critique or criticism. I don't know. What's the difference? Anybody? I mean, Claire gets to have be a critiquer, but is her critique and somebody hired her to have a critique, right? But it really boils down to her. Anyway, I'm answering the question. Who would like to answer that? Anybody?
This is Tracy. This is Tracy. I'll step in since I threw that critique word out into the middle of the room. I think it goes to, if we're talking, let's talk business. So we'll just put it in the scope of business for a moment, because to Celeste's point, some of those skills translate into relationships, but they can also be far more delicate in a personal relationship. In a professional environment where in certain circumstances, especially in management, there is a review process and there is a need for perhaps outlining what goals and objectives are, and then talking with employees about whether or not those goals and objectives are being met. So that isn't always opinion, or at least in the best sense of leadership, shouldn't always be based on opinion. It should have a little bit more of a balance with regard to not only what the division or the company's objectives are and how those goals are going to be met by the individual employees, but also you hired those employees for a reason. What were their skill sets? Why are they valid? Why do they matter? And then how is that personality of the employee? Can as managers, as supervisors, can we allow ourselves to set aside ego for a moment and really see that employee as an individual, as the person we hired with a specific skill set, and then maximize all that potential? And that requires us to be probably a little bit more flexible than we might have been taught in the past. I think leadership training is getting more, is finessing that skill for managers a little bit better than it used to, because our corporate environment has to be so much more flexible than it used to be. But when you're really talking with someone about what they're going to bring to the table to meet those goals and objectives, how can it be less your opinion and more that united dialogue that allows people to really feel like they're contributing to the success of whatever that journey is? And that is a vital aspect that, in my opinion, doesn't really have a lot of basis in opinion, but it has to do more with the manager's own intuitiveness about that individual, their strengths, their opportunities, and then maximizing those. That requires a manager to let go of a lot of what they may think is right and more about what they're going to glean from that employee who they trust and want to build a better trust with. Long-winded answer, but
I like it. Lots to think about there. Okay, I'm going to go back to gallery view because I do think that Felicia would like to say something. Go ahead, Felicia.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Tracy was saying. I think a key part of this is knowing the individual. There's not a one size fits all approach to, especially if you're talking about to your staff and to your employees. If you read a book or take a seminar and just follow 1, 2, 3, 4, everyone's gonna react differently. Some people are very good at taking criticism that rolls off them. They want to absorb it. Other people, their instinct is to really take that personally. In my realm, we're doing a lot with art and creativity, and that's really personal to a lot of people. So knowing who that individual is, knowing their personality, knowing what they're able to handle is essential to going to approach that. And you still want to give them the information. It's just, for some of my people, I can go and spend 10 minutes and just say, hey, here's this ABCD, let's work on it. And others, I need to spend more time with them. I need to really hype them up and accentuate their positives in a more deliberate way before I can give them any feedback. Otherwise, they won't be able to hear what I'm saying. They're just going to internalize it, and it's not going to be productive for anyone.
Yeah. It's almost like we could use, I just don't want to miss anybody. Hey, breathing. It's almost like it's a quagmire, isn't it? Because based on what Felicia just said too, is, how can we learn to be better at receiving critiques, feedback, so that we don't see it as an attack. But of course, sometimes when it's done poorly, it is an attack. We have to deal with that. And no place is it more an attack than in intimate relationships, right, Celeste? When it's done poorly. So that leads me. So what could we? I once heard somebody refer to, it was a philosopher. It was on some TED Talk something, and he said constructive criticism is like love. I want my husband to stop loving me so much. But joke. How can we all look at this criticism more as a way to grow, I guess? How can we, and how can we discern, let me two-prong that question. How can we look at it more as an opportunity to grow? Help people like me, who are probably, Felicia, the defensive people. You would have to lull me into submission to accept criticism. And how can we know the difference between somebody actually giving us valid feedback and somebody who's just trying to harm us? Anybody? Celeste, let's start with you, and then Jennifer, you can kick in.
Yeah, I think when giving criticism, it's really important to value the relationship first. And what I have found to be most effective is really expressing gratitude, really expressing something positive, showing appreciation for that person, the value that they bring, whether it's a personal capacity or professional. So starting it off with making them feel good, and then saying, I noticed this, and this is the impact, right? I noticed this behavior, or I noticed this thing, and this is the impact of that. And so I'm wondering if this is a possibility, or how can we work together to rectify this, or how can we work together to create something productive? And then I think it's really important to say the reason why. Because so often we give feedback or we give criticism, and wanting someone to change a behavior or action, but they don't know the impact of their current behavior, and they don't know the impact of the change in behavior. So I think it's really important to paint that picture for them so we can gain that buy-in and be working towards a solution together, rather than just being this dictator pointing fingers saying change this and fix that, without bringing them in on yeah, like without it being a collaborative experience. And I think too, then asking for feedback from that employee or that person that you're in relationship with on what is it that I can do to help support you in this, so that it can be something that you're doing together rather than so one-sided.
That sounds like it brings the temperature way down in an emotional moment. Did anybody else want to pipe in there? How to to be more receptive to getting feedback? Is there anything, Jennifer, go ahead.
So I think checking our intent when giving feedback is huge. What is my purpose here? Is my purpose to let out anger or discontent, or am I really giving somebody a building block they can use? How they receive that is not on me, that's on them. And in turn, when I'm receiving, that's on me. If somebody comes at me with an emotional feedback, I need to step back and think, okay, is this coming from a place of empathy or love or, a good intention? If not, then what can I piece through what they've given me that and find what their feedback is truly about? Okay, they came at me with anger. What's behind that? Where's that coming from? How can I relate that to the session that we just had? That makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think you really have to ask what's their, what's going on behind that. Yeah, Claire, go ahead.
Yeah, piggyback off that, nonverbals are also critical here. So your second prong question about how do we know when feedback that we're receiving is damaging or if it's actually something that can be constructive for us. For me in my past, I always look at nonverbals almost sometimes more so than what is being said, because oftentimes we can tell right away, just in our perception and our body, my hands start to sweat if somebody tells me something that just doesn't feel right, if it doesn't seem like it's coming, as Jennifer was saying, from a place of good intention. And from that, you can dig in. Well, look, tell me more. Say that right back, tell me more, and open up the conversation, because oftentimes it's something way deeper than what they're telling you verbally. And so be conscious of the nonverbals you're getting, and then open it up for dialogue. Tell me more, or can you give me an example? And continue the conversation so that you can better discern if it is something that's negative for you and you need to step back, or it's something that will actually provide you an opportunity for growth. And I will say too, your first prong, how do we improve the way that we get feedback and give feedback? A couple of things I'd like to share is somebody mentioned, I think Celeste, is lead by example. So I'm a huge proponent of, look, if I'm in sales and I'm doing a demo, for example, I'll invite my team. If anybody would like to come to the demo, please come to the demo, watch me and give me feedback. Let's debrief 15 minutes after while things are fresh. I'm always inviting people into my world so that we create that safe space together. Something else I do that I'm just kind of weird is that I like to use humor, because feedback and these things, we get so nervous and we get sweaty when we think about giving feedback and constructive criticism, and we can lighten it just by a little bit of humor. So for example, when I'm on a new team and I'm trying to build that relationship right away, I'll say something like, I'm going to get the elephant out of the room and tell you that I'm going to expect that you give me feedback, and we're going to build this beautiful bridge together. And it's going to feel weird at first. We're getting to know each other. But in doing so, in practicing, we will create a much stronger bridge, a reciprocal two-way street. And so I try to use humor to diffuse the fact that the word feedback can already give people anxiety. So let's just diffuse the word a little bit.
That's a good tip. Yeah. I'm going to open this back up to gallery. With the time we have remaining, I told you guys I'm going to finish up with my food question. But before that, this is really fascinating to me. What about when somebody gives you positive feedback? Has anybody here ever been uncomfortable with that? And of course, what it says is, I've got tons of baggage. I get that. But, like an employer or my husband's nice. I says something positive. No. I don't really like it. No, it's really hard for me to take it in any case. I mean, am I in an island by myself here, or is
Not at all?
Oh, thank God, thank God, because I flattery. Usually when somebody says something positive, Freud, help me. What do
Why?
we do?
Yeah.
What is that? What do I do with that? That's got to be false. That's got to be inaccurate. Anybody want to tap in on that one? Yeah,
We
Celeste, go ahead, and then Felicia jump in.
Yeah, so I think that when we receive feedback or receive, oh, you look really nice today, or oh, you did a really good job, or oh, you really killed that presentation. I think there's this element of perfectionism that comes in. And often we hold ourselves to a very high standard. So when we receive feedback, if we feel like there's something we didn't do right, or we missed a word, or we, messed something up, we often focus on the negative within ourselves. And I think that focus on the negative within ourselves also is what we experience outside ourselves. We often focus on the things that need to be fixed about the people around us, our employees, our partners. And so I think this brings up a really good point to focus on the gifts, focus on the abilities, focus on the talents and strengths, kind of like Claire was talking about, and be able to really connect in that place. And then also, I think what's really valuable, to go back to your previous question, is to admit when we made a mistake. Especially in a group setting, if your leader can show up and say, hey, yesterday when I said this, I realized that I was coming from a place of perfectionism and I was coming from a place of my own ideals. And I just want to apologize about how that came across. And I think that being willing to take ownership of mistakes really builds trust and really opens up that line of communication in showing that vulnerability and then being open to receive the reflections from your team or from the people around you.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody else? Felicia, did you want to jump in there too?
I was just as a performer, we get the applause, after a performance. And then after a show, a lot of times the personal connections. Oh my gosh, that was so good. You were so great at this. And it takes a long time to be able to thank somebody and not be like, oh no, it's and drop your head and you kind of dismiss it. And it is hard and it takes practice. And with my students, when we do student showcases and things, part of the coaching is after your performance, they're going to applause and you should stand there and receive them. Don't rush off stage. Don't run off. And it's weird and it's hard at first, but standing there, accepting it as your gratitude, as your thank you back to them, and then you can go ahead and exit off. But I think it's just for so many of us, it's really uncomfortable at first.
Yes, we just need to learn to say thank you. For sure.
If I can add on to that, to Felicia's point, there's a concept in Australia called the tall poppy syndrome. And I think especially for people who identify as women, they may have experienced this more often than not, where you're not supposed to rise above others. You accept your lot and you do so with a humble attitude, and therefore it's harder for some people to accept that. Now, I'll bridge this. Number one, thank you, Felicia, for acknowledging my voice. I just nodded when you said that, but I'm saying that now because often I find if someone pays me a compliment and I'm just like, oh, shucksy darn, if I can turn to that person and say, you're so kind, thank you, then it takes all that pressure off of me with regard to aspects of perfectionism or anything like that. That person spoke out just to say something kind. Holy cow, do we need more of that?
Yeah.
And then the second aspect to that is simply, if we are all trying to give credit where credit is due, to acknowledge someone's hard work or whatever effort they put forth or the chutzpah that they bring up onto stage, it doesn't matter if it's perfect. They showed up, and we can then quash that tall poppy syndrome and just applaud ourselves for continuing to be, who is it, Brene Brown, in the arena, I think is what she says. We're showing up, we're being there. And the more of us who do that, the easier it gets for everyone. And then we don't have to worry so much about feedback or review or criticism or critique. We're all just part of it, and we share in that. And that makes a huge difference.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Claire, go ahead.
Oh, I'm loving this. The two things I would add on to this are, one, the flip coin of this is to take that moment thank that person. It takes an active mindset to stop and not go, and
Right.
totally brush it off. So I know I personally have to work at this a lot. I love the idea of the poppy syndrome, but it's once that moment happens, allow yourself to internalize it. That's what's forgotten is we say thank you. We feel really good because we didn't brush it off or try to make a joke about it. But then you got to internalize it and let yourself accept that moment of whatever was said. I think that that's really important. And then also, I think we also need to remember that we are always being observed, whether it's by our teammates, whether it's by our colleagues, our bosses, our employees, other people around. So when someone does pay us a compliment and we just brush it off and do that thing, someone's observing that likely. And it just, it's a ripple effect. It's a snowball. Other people see that, and it's helping or stopping in that moment, accepting it, and then internalizing it and showing that behavior is something that I think others could watch and do themselves too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like we need to teach this in school better than we do. Starting. Well, I mean, we all need to learn to see this feedback or loop differently. And we're all imperfect, and yet I struggle when people tell me I'm not perfect. Oh, I hate that. And yet I know I'm imperfect. I don't understand how those two things reside together, and yet they do. I would love to keep talking about this, but I promised you guys I'd kind of keep some reins in on the time. So I wanted to finish up. So just to finish up, I started the delicious story was my excuse to talk to people about food. That was really what I was all about. And so, rather than and I usually ask the guests to share a memorable meal. And that's one of my favorite questions to ask when I'm talking to clients about their life story. I love that question. So I don't want to take that much of your time. So I asked you to you get to we'll go around the table one more time, and you can either share what you're going to eat tonight, what your comfort food is, because I think that's very revealing. Or if there's a food you think could use with a little loving feedback, it could be a little bit revamped. Go ahead and share that as you might in your real world. So I will just start with Jennifer.
Oh, that was kind of funny. If I'm being honest, something that I feel it could be revamped with criticism, and I don't know exactly what the criticism would be for it, but I think anything that is Americanized needs help.
You want to give an example, like Velveeta cheese in macaroni cheese? That's Americanized. Is that an example?
I prefer more Mediterranean, Hispanic, anything that's not American. American to me is just very fatty and unhealthy and not full of flavor.
Okay. No judgment there. No.
No, I know I'm seeing all this stuff and I'm like, I'm not being very constructive in my criticism here.
Well,
this
Jennifer,
is more of an opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that opinion. That's okay. No judgment. You can criticize. The American food will take it. It can take it. Next, Tracy. Can I put you on the spot?
Sure. I vacillate with comfort food between a really delicious macaroni and cheese and sushi.
Yeah.
And if I had to offer feedback to all chefs, please stop adding jalapenos or sriracha to everything. Please give us an option, just an option, to have it on the side or to add it instead of ruining a perfectly good vegan dish by having too many jalapenos in it. That's just my opinion. I don't know if that's constructive criticism or not.
I think with food, we're allowed to say whatever we want. Okay, Felicia.
I'm not much of a cook. My partner does all of the cooking in our house. And so I don't offer constructive criticism because I'm just happy that it is in front of me and presented to me.
Good for you.
Yeah. My favorite comfort food is probably tomato soup and grilled cheese, which is pretty simple and to the point. So
yes. Oh,
yeah. I don't offer critique or anything to the chef other than praise.
Yay. Oh, thank you. I love that. Celeste.
Yes, I am with Jennifer. I really love bright, flavorful food. So Mediterranean is one of my favorites. And so a couple of restaurants that I really love locally are Flavory Bistro and Eatery A. And yeah, just the feta cheese and the Kalamata olives and the lemon and the brightness. Yeah, I just really love like that party in my mouth.
Lovely. I love it. So, and Claire.
So I gave myself some self-feedback recently because I do a lot of the cooking and I enjoy it. But what I'm not great at are counting on leftovers. I make too much. I know I do. And my problem is that we put all these leftovers in the fridge. And so for dinner tonight, we're having leftovers. But the feedback I've given myself recently is to date the things because I'll make things, I'll put them in there and I'm like, God, when did we eat that? And then you get sick because you left it in there too long. I know I'm not the only one here. So my feedback to myself is make sure to date everything with the food that you're putting in the fridge.
Smart move. Yeah, for sure. Wow. Well, I love everything you guys have said today, and I've got so much to think about and time. I want to thank each of you, Jennifer, Tracy, Felicia, Celeste, and Claire, for being here on The Delicious Story today and for sharing a gift of your time and talking about this subject. I feel better. I feel better because really, I have problems with this topic, and so I was really helpful to listen to all of you wise women. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
And there you have it, another episode of The Delicious Story. Please join us again when we interview an interesting guest who shares insights about how to live your life story well. In the meantime, let me leave you with a quote. To avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, and be nothing. Aristotle.